Imagine having the time and money to follow your passions and live life on your own terms. Welcome to Podcasting Mastery, where you'll learn the secrets of podcasting your way to a stress-free lifestyle. Let's grab a cool tropical drink and then join James, Kimberly, and the Turtle in the Secret Beach Hut studio.
Yes, this is James Martell along with Kimberly Juchnowski.
Hello there.
And we are again tucked into the Secret Beach Hut studio, and we're so glad you've decided to join us. This week, we will be continuing our conversation about developing a lifestyle business so we can all spend less time doing business and more time enjoying our families, more time traveling, and more time doing all of the things that matter to us the most. It's for these reasons we continue to focus on strategies for both developing a passive monthly income stream and passive ways of developing new clients and customers for your business. Kimberly, how are you doing today?
Doing great. How are you doing, James?
Very well, thank you. And I do understand we have a very special guest joining us today.
We do. Today we have Marc Mawhinney joining us. Marc is the host of the Natural Born Coaches podcast, a podcast that's all about helping listeners grow a successful coaching business. He interviews guests who give actionable strategies and resources to be the best coach possible. Marc has published a whopping 441 episodes interviewing entrepreneurs, people with decades of experience in business, and esteemed coaches from around the world. Episodes typically range from about 20 minutes to 30 minutes in length.
Sounds very interesting, and I did have a chance to listen to a couple of episodes, so I'm interested to talk with Marc about that. Now, before we do that, why don't you take a moment and push the button, play a little music to set the mood for the show. Now, Marc Mawhinney is on a mission to help coaches build stronger businesses. He has a passion for entrepreneurship, having started a number of businesses in his life and growing 1 to 100 employees. After becoming a coach, he saw the struggles that coaches face while trying to build their businesses and decided to do something about it. He launched Natural Born Coaches, a daily podcast where he interviews successful coaches to share their advice and works with coaches with his one-on-one, group, and online programs. Marc frequently makes media appearances and is a contributor for Entrepreneur.com. Marc, welcome to Podcasting Mastery.
Hey guys, thanks for having me.
It's great to have you on board, Marc. Now, hey, let's do this. Before we dig in, why don't you take a few moments and tell us about yourself. Tell us about your personal story and your background.
Well, first of all, I have to get a secret beach house studio. I don't have that, so I have a boring desk, so.
Yeah, people do want to visit us live, and it happens once in a while.
Yeah, it's always sunny in BC, I guess.
It really is.
Yeah, I mean, the Cliff Notes version for my journey is got into real estate when I was 21. And I always joke that I looked about 15 back then. So everyone thought it was the paper boy coming up the driveway, and it wasn't. And had a really good run through my 20s and for about 10 years where everything was just going very well. And I thought, wow, this whole success thing's easy, I was working a lot of hours, but I thought, you know what? I can't fail. Life's perfect, and I'll have a bunch of private islands by the time I'm 40 and jets and stuff. Well, needless to say, it didn't work out like that, but it ended up working out for the best. But in 2009, I went through a business closure where I grew. That was a business you referenced. It grew to 100 employees, and it toppled. Like a lot of people in real estate around that, 2009 time wasn't the best time. And that's what basically got me into coaching is I ended up hiring a coach to get back on my feet later on, rather than trying to be a lone wolf. Like I was always a lone wolf thinking I can handle it. And I realized that, no, I can't. Everyone needs help. So I got helped back to my feet by a coach, and then I started to explore it, and then I started coaching, and then, a few years later launched the podcast and stuff after my coaching business was rolling, because I realized a lot of other coaches were struggling to get their businesses going, and it's not an easy thing. I guess any business is tough, but coaching's tricky. And that's how we got here today. The podcast launched November 2014, launched as a daily show, and I run twice a week now, but we've done 441 episodes, so it's been a lot of fun.
What inspired you to launch the Natural Born Coaches podcast?
It's strange. I just kind of, like anything, jumped in and did it. It's Michael Masterson, the author, calls it ready, fire, aim.
Yeah, I've heard of that one.
So I'd listened to podcasts probably, I was a fairly early adopter, not the earliest, but I think I was listening to them back in 08, 09, which was so just a few years into it, but never even thought of having a podcast. And the big reason I decided to launch one was I realized I needed a vehicle to get my message out there. And I thought, is it going to be video? I mean, I love video, love writing and stuff, but I thought, podcasting, I've always enjoyed it, and let's give it a whirl. So I just jumped in, and got started. And luckily, I was like the typical entrepreneur. You jump off the cliff and hope you can build a plane on the way down.
Yep.
I built the plane just before I hit the ground, and here we are.
So who would you say your ideal client/listener would be for your show?
Well, I work solely with coaches now. So when I started as a coach, I was really niche down. I said, I want to work with any entrepreneur, that narrows it down. And I worked with some, and there's some bricks and mortar entrepreneurs and stuff. But what happened was a few people on my client roster were coaches. And those are the calls and the sessions that I enjoyed the most. Nothing against, the people with the bricks and mortar businesses, but I just really gelled with those coaches. And so that's kind of how I went to there. So I'm going to plant my flag in the ground and refer off any other business that doesn't meet that criteria of being a coach. I'm going to work only with the coaches, helping them there. And when I looked at the podcasting landscape, there weren't a lot of shows specifically geared towards coaches. There were it wasn't like it is nowadays. I mean, there's tons of entrepreneurial shows, but even back then there were a lot of shows that were more general entrepreneurship. Mm-hmm. And I thought, wow, they really need coaches need something specifically for them, because there's some unique challenges that coaches have that go past what new entrepreneurs are going through. So the people listening to the show, it's a wide range of coaches, but a lot of the people listening are those newer coaches thinking of jumping into the industry, or they've been in it for a few years and they're just looking to get more traction and get more clients.
So typically, what kind of coaches would they be? Are they fitness coaches, health coaches, business coaches, any type of coach?
Oh man, yeah, they're all over the map. So we've had tons of niches. I mean, we've even, and that I think reflects from the variety of guests that we have on the show. So we've had, for example, a coach on the show that specifically worked with. He's a coach for people who are trying to get contracts from the government. So he's he has his own podcast, Kevin Jans. He's in Florida, and it's a contracting officer podcast, which is pretty niche down when you think about it, to coach people through the process of getting their proposals accepted by government. And that's all he does. So the interesting thing is, regardless of who the guests on the show, if it's someone very niche down like Kevin, someone who's a health coach could learn something from that, because at the end of the day, Kevin's building a coaching business, and they may think, oh, there's something he did that would apply for my niche as well. So that's a broad range, just we've talked to all sorts of people all over the world, and you guys know what it's like. That's a great thing with podcasting. It just connects you with people you would have never, ever spoke with, right? I'm on the East Coast of Canada, and I've met so many, say, Australians, for example. I've woke up at some odd hours. I'm sure you guys have too, to interview some Aussies. So yeah, it's interesting. It's a lot of fun.
So from a business perspective, then, of course, business owners, entrepreneurs, coaches start podcasts for all kinds of reasons. Sometimes it's maybe advocacy. Lots of times it's to generate leads, or maybe to further or build their personal or corporate brand, of course, generate sales. In your particular situation, why, from a business point of view, did you launch Natural Born Coaches? Why did you decide on podcasting, and you touched upon it a little bit, over video or over, say, blogging?
Well, when I started the podcast, I didn't have an online program. I have one now, that's out there, and I have people coming into it. But back then, it was solely to get one-on-one clients. And then I added group programs, so it was getting people in for my group programs. And then it was later on that I introduced the online program. So I find with podcasting, not to knock people, if someone has a passion over a hobby, let's say they're into antique cars or wine or something like that, I guess you could do a podcast and they'll get something from it. But I'm a big fan of monetizing your podcast. It's a lot of work if you're not making money from it. Me, I kind of like to eat. I like having a roof over my head. That's kind of cool.
So, yeah, I'm with you there.
Yeah, and I find that some podcasters are, when they get started with it, they have this dream of sleeping and having the bank account, the money rolling in while they're sleeping, or they're kind of on a beach, right? And and it's not like that. It's going to take time to build it up. But I'm a really big fan of especially service-based industries, because I think that is your quickest path to good revenue right away. It takes a while to build up those online programs and the other things with the passive income. So it's a lot easier in my books to get say 5 one-on-one clients at $3,000 each for the package for $15,000, as opposed to selling 1,500 ebooks at $10 each or something like that. I mean, that's a lot of work. So you can expand from there. You don't. That's what I did. I didn't have really any master plan. I was going to launch a podcast, use it to get clients, and I think it was about 6 weeks out that I got my first client directly from the podcast. But I also did 42 episodes, right? Because I had 7 days a week at that time. So that was kind of compressed it. That was close to a year's worth in the normal world of podcasts if you're doing a weekly show.
Jason, can you tell us a little bit about the format of your show? I see that your episodes are 30 minutes in length, and as you said, it was a daily show, and now it's down to twice weekly, you said? Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, once I got out of the madhouse, I decided to drop it from 7. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I guess when I started the show, like a lot of people, I was helped. I was in a program that John Lee Dumas had, and that's where the daily thing came from. I thought, you know what, John's doing it that way, and I'll do it this way with a tweak it for coaches, right? And what I found after doing a couple hundred episodes, it was last summer, I looked at it and I said, oh man, I'm really on a hamster wheel. I'm going to move it to 5 days a week just to get the weekends freed up. And, it's still a lot of content. And it was just a couple months ago that I switched to twice a week. And that was with the launch of my online program and some other things, because I was changing a lot of things with my business to introduce boundaries and getting really clear on time and stuff. And I looked and I thought, you know what, for me, I'm not getting the benefit of doing the daily show compared to the time investment. Even though I have my brother as an editing company, he handles all that and stuff. It's still a lot of work. You got to do the interviews and record them. So I'm loving twice a week. For me, it gets the job done. And my business is actually a lot better, like higher in terms of revenue since making that change, because it's freed me up to do some other things. So that works for me, but you got to look at your own situation, your own business. For me, I thought I'm not going to stick to the daily thing just because I like the word daily and I want to, brag and say, hey, I'm doing a daily show. For me, it's dollars in the bank at the end of the day. That's how I keep score. Yeah.
So let's explore this for a second here, because there is a common denominator here. We do quite a few John Lee Dumas. I don't know if the students is the right word, but business owners of his training, and without fail, the ones that started a daily show, first of all, they felt they had to start a daily show to be successful, but every single one of them has trimmed it back to most of them 2, maybe 3 episodes per week for the same reason. You said hamster wheel and you call it the madhouse. Talk to our listeners a little bit more, because I guess there probably is a huge advantage to doing a major push in the beginning, but then backing it off. So give us your experiences on what would you say to somebody new getting started, I guess is where we're going.
Well, a lot of people, when they're talking to me about podcasting, they're thinking of the 7 days a week, not realizing how much work it is. And you guys know how much work podcasting is. It's not, if you're into the 4-hour work week, Tim Ferriss, don't do a podcast. Although Tim Ferriss has a podcast, so I doubt very much he has a 4-hour work week.
Yeah, exactly.
I went for dinner with Tim Ferriss, and one of his buddies at the table said, Tim Ferriss works way more than 4 hours a week.
Yeah. Yes. And I don't know Tim Ferriss. I'm saying this jokingly, but Tim Ferriss he's a real prick because he makes my job harder, right? You can edit that out if you want, but everybody comes to me wanting to do a 4-hour work week. I want to be a coach. I want to do a 4-hour work week. I read Tim Ferriss's book and I'm like, oh God, come on. So I tell people with podcasting, the better way to do it probably is start, do once a week. I think once a week you can get that traction that you need. Don't get into once a month or the biggest key is consistency. So I see these people, and you notice it every summer, especially, where they're doing a regular schedule, and then all of a sudden the summer comes and they go MIA, they change it. So they're doing weekly for a while, and then they release none for 3 weeks, and then they may release 2 one week, 1 the next, 3, and it's just all over the place, and people don't know what to expect. So whatever you're doing, keep a consistent schedule. Don't keep those listeners guessing, or you're going to lose some of them. But I do think people get hung up on that daily thing. And for me, I looked at it as we're recording this. We're at 441 episodes. We'll be higher when it's released. Is there much difference between having 441 episodes or 508 or 677? No, probably not. If I can't say what I have to say and get the value out there 2 episodes a week, then I'm doing something wrong. So I like twice a week, but it really depends on your schedule too and your business goals. But for me, I think twice a week works well for me.
Well, and you mentioned something too, that it is a lot of work. And there's another common denominator that we've seen interviewing other successful podcasters. Most of them, almost without fail, will say something like, I had no idea how much work it was going to be.
Yeah.
Like I thought it was just going to be much easier than it is. And then I jumped into it and it's like, oh my gosh, it's just like, it's so much work. And then they'll say something like, well, then I decided to get some help and I wish I would have gotten more help quicker, and then they'll hire an editor or something. So in your particular situation, you mentioned your brother does your editing. Who do you have that surrounds you to support you in the development of your weekly episodes?
Well, I did the first couple hundred episodes myself because my brother had a sales job, and I ended up talking to him and saying, he had no clue anything about podcast editing. So sure enough, he jumped in, he learned how to edit, took some courses, and then he took over the summer of 2015. And like I said, it made my life a lot easier. So my brother's a big part of it. And a big thing for me is right now I have VAs for specific tasks, but I need to do better. I need to have one attached to my hip at all times. And that's a goal by the end of 2016, bring someone on. My problem is I have real trouble delegating. I'm getting better, but I always struggled with that through even the real estate years where I thought, well, I could do it best. I'll handle it. So I forced myself to push stuff off, with it. But right now, so I was big letting go of my baby with the podcast, but my brother, he enjoys that. Me, I hate editing. I'd rather get a root canal.
That's bad.
Who does your editing? Is it Kimberly does it? Or
Absolutely not. I'd rather have a root canal also.
One thing in this isn't so much with editing, but just something comes to mind that I would say with podcasters. I heard this saying before, and I laugh whenever I hear it. It's called podcrastination. There are people who are looking to start their podcast back when I started looking to start my show, and they still haven't. And here I am, almost 2 years later. Yeah. And I think some people try to make it too perfect. And so they hum and haw over their title, over their cover art, and just everything. And it's just, you can't do that or you're just never going to get started. So I tell people, you know what, your show's going to evolve. My show's evolved. And I wouldn't say the theme's changed. It's kept the same, but things like the frequency, like we talked about, we're going through a rebrand with the website, logos and all that stuff. But that happened over time. I didn't worry about it being too perfect out of the gates. I don't know if you've ever seen the first logo for Entrepreneur on Fire. It was, John and Kate have said it was garbage. It was this ugly blue thing, but they got started, right?
Yeah.
But you got to get started. And I think that's business in general, but especially with podcasters. Some people shouldn't be podcasting it. And I know that sounds mean to say it, but if they're perfectionists, they shouldn't be podcasting, and they probably shouldn't be entrepreneurs if they're too much of a perfectionist, because you're just going to get steamrolled.
So how were you, just on a side note here, how were you introduced to podcasting? Where'd you find out about it?
That's a good question. I'm trying to think. Again, this goes to the whole ready, fire, aim. There wasn't a big master plan. I think what happened was actually, I know exactly what happened. I'm a big journaler. I journal every day. There's very few days I don't journal. And I can remember journaling about, okay, what am I going to do to get more exposure for my coaching business? And then I also wanted to do something that was going to help coaches because, like I said, I got my business rolling. I knew a lot of other coaches were struggling. I thought, okay, how am I going to do it? And, I looked at blogging. I can remember buying a blogging course. I was going to jump deep into that, I thought, is it going to be videos? And just something about podcasting. I thought I can make the joke. I'm sure it's been told 20 times on your show so far about the face for radio. So I won't use that one. But it is kind of nice, with video, you got to worry about getting all dolled up and is your shirt ironed and is the lighting great? And, I do plenty of videos and stuff, but I do like podcasting. You turn her on, you let her roll, and I just enjoy it. It's a good medium. So that's how I got started, was journaling different ideas. And there were, I don't know, maybe 10 options. Okay, which of these am I going to go with for growing my business? And I just chose podcasting and jumped in.
Now, you have 441 episodes, as we've mentioned a few times here, and that is a massive amount of podcasts. What we've learned over the time that we've been podcasting is business owners who are considering starting a podcast often are apprehensive because they're wondering if they can find enough topics to cover. Now, with over 400 under your belt already, I'm sensing you won't be running out of topics anytime soon. So what's your experience in selecting topics, and what advice could you give on that note?
Well, the guests do all the heavy lifting, right? They provide the content. So, and now the first few hundred episodes, I stuck more closely to the standard podcast flow for the show, right? And what's happened in the episodes after a few hundred is I opened it up and I kept it a lot more kind of free flowing. And this isn't to knock John with Entrepreneur on Fire and stuff. I don't know how he's done 1,400 episodes with the same questions. I would blow my head off.
Me too.
And so now, I read a little bit about them. I don't have time to read books from the guests coming on the show and stuff, but I'll read some of their blog posts, see what they're doing on social media, watch a few videos. But really, I am very unprepared. I'm not spending hours researching for these guests. I like keep it free flowing. And I was going to make a joke. You down a bottle or two of wine, just keep it interesting. But but I do like to keep it really candid. And I learned that from David Ralph, Join Up Dots in the UK, really successful podcaster. I've been on his show and he's been on mine, and he doesn't prepare at all. He basically does it like you're sitting in a pub and just shooting the breeze. And I really like that. So the longer my show's been on, I've been keeping it much more open-ended that way. And I think it's a better show, better conversations, and more value that way.
You bet. I agree with you. You mentioned you started to develop more exposure for your coaching business. If I could ask, what would you say, what percentage of clients come from your podcast now, would you say?
I've been asked a question before, and it's really tough to try to answer that question because my business kind of has a couple legs of that table. So I'm really big on social media. I'm big on Facebook and stuff like that. And then, of course, there's a podcast. There's a few other things. So what usually happens is somebody, maybe they stumble onto the podcast and then they connect with me on Facebook. I've got a Facebook group with a couple thousand coaches right now. It's called the Coaching Jungle. There's a shameless plug. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people will hear the podcast and go join the Facebook group, and then they get to know my stuff, or vice versa. They stumble onto the Facebook group and, he's got a podcast for coaches, and they go that way. So it's really tough to it's kind of like my real estate days. I used to just bomb my territory with postcards and, radio ads and all that. I would ask people, so why did you call me? How did you choose to hire me as your agent? And they'd be like, well, we hear your ad on the radio whenever we're in the car going to work, and then we came home and the podcast was in the door, and then we saw your thing in the newspaper and stuff like that. So it's really hard to say how many come from the podcast, but I could say for sure that my business wouldn't be where it's at without the podcast. I would probably, God knows what where my business would be without the podcast. So I'm a really big fan of podcasting because my business is night and day after the podcast compared to before.
It's time for us to take a short break, and when we return, we'll continue our conversation with Marc and learn more about his podcast, Natural Born Coaches. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
More Podcasting Mastery with James and Kimberly from the Secret Beach Hut Studio after this.
Is your website out of date? Is it mobile friendly? Why not let us design your website and we'll make sure it looks the way it should on all platforms and devices, including iPhones, iPads, and other smartphones and tablets. We'll even optimize your site for search engines and make it easy for you to share your content and products on social sites such as Facebook and Twitter with built-in sharing features. For more information and to schedule your no-obligation free consultation, go to podcastingmastery.com/website. Once again, that's www.podcastingmastery.com/website.
Would you love to spend less time doing business and more time enjoying your family, more time traveling, and more time doing all of the things that matter to you most? Whether you're looking to develop a passive monthly income stream or you're looking for passive ways of generating new clients and customers for your business, James Martell's free podcasting webinar is the place to start. James Martell, an 11-year podcasting veteran, will show you how to quickly and easily launch a podcast that will impress all who hear it to attract all of the clients and customers you need, and how to do it all in less than 1 hour a week using equipment you already own. Register now for this lifestyle and business-changing webinar at podcastingmastery.com/webinar. We'll see you there. Once again, that's www.podcastingmastery.com/webinar.
Is your podcast getting bogged down because of time or technical issues? Would you prefer to let someone else handle all of the production and technical details? Our virtual producer works remotely from a studio to provide you with production, technical, and creative assistance. Our virtual producer will call you and your guest by phone or Skype, and then record, produce, and upload each episode with SEO-friendly show notes to your website for automated distribution to social media and the major podcast directories. Sound intriguing? Visit podcastingmastery.com/virtual producer to learn more. That's www.podcastingmastery.com/virtual producer.
Now back to Podcasting Mastery from the Secret Beach Hut Studio.
Yes, we're back, and I'm here with my co-host Kimberly Juchnowski and Marc Mawhinney, host of Natural Born Coaches. Now, Marc, what would you say the biggest challenge your coaching students have?
Well, the biggest challenge is when people come to me is they don't have enough clients without money coming in, then it's awful hard to coach and to keep your doors open. So most of the people that come to me are either coaches who, an awful lot of them have finished certification and training and stuff. But the problem is a lot of them thought, okay, I'll buy this certification for $5,000 or $10,000. And then they're given some training on the coaching side, but then they come out of it and they've got the piece of paper, but it's not giving them the clients. You know, it's great to have, they're better coaches and stuff, but they need the business end, which I think a lot of certifications are lacking. So that's the biggest challenge, is that they're needing those clients through. And I think another problem which I constantly fight with is all these people that you see on Facebook and social media. You see the ads saying build a 6 or 7 figure coaching business working 12 minutes a day in your swim trunks in the hot tub, right? They rent a boat or a mansion and they've got, that stuff, and hey, piles of cash on the bed, and and that I tell people, what, it's probably not going to work out like that. Now you do very well with coaching. It's going to take time. And I found really took me a year just to figure out what the heck I was doing, right? And then year 2 was good. And then now I'm 3 years into it, and going forward, things are rolling, but it wasn't this way 2 weeks into the business. There were a lot of frustrating times and banging my head against the wall. So that's the biggest challenge, is just to get those paying clients.
I noticed as well on your website that you've been interviewed on literally dozens and dozens and dozens of other podcasts. How's that impacted the growth of your audience, would you say?
Well, this has been the best one, by the way. Yeah, no, it's cool because I go on the shows. I enjoy doing the interviews and stuff. And it's nice when you get someone reaching out and say, hey, I heard you on Joe's podcast, and I'd like to talk with you about potentially working with you. So I've gotten clients that way. But that's why I'm doing it, is it exposes you to people you would have never been exposed to if you just stayed in your own little bubble with your own community. And I have scaled back somewhat. I mean, I had one year where I was on pace to do almost 100 of them. And it was in addition to doing my show, I was like, wow, this is just, it's too much. So now I pulled back. I still do a few interviews a month on other shows just to stay out there and stuff, but I'm a little more selective with it just because of time, you know. I've gotten really tight and introducing boundaries here in 2016, and, you know, I had to do that for energy and all that. But ironically, as I've done that, my revenues have gone up a lot. So I'm working, shouldn't say I'm working less. When I'm not doing calls and stuff, I'm always kind of on and I'm doing things, but I'm not on Skype 24/7 anymore. You know, I'm being selective.
Mm-hmm. So why do you think podcasting is such a solid approach to marketing a business online?
I think it's because it's so easy for people to access podcasts now, and you know, with the smartphones, and now you've got Android into the game, and more people going that route. But also, you don't have to watch it. You know, like me, when I'm in the grocery store, or if I'm going for a walk, or if I'm going around the house doing something, I've got either a podcast or audiobooks playing. It's not like video, you know. Hopefully nobody's driving, watching video.
It's coming. You know it's coming.
Yeah, I saw that the other day.
Yeah, that's right. Or if you're at the grocery store trying to pick out, you know, what type of bread and stuff, but you're watching, you know, Gary Vaynerchuk or something, it's going to take you twice as long in the grocery store. But podcasts, you could put them in and you could just go about your day. You know, you can multitask very easily with it. So that's why I love the medium, is it makes it much easier than, say, video, where your eyeballs have to be glued to it. You have to be a little more focused or concentrating on it. Podcasting, you don't. You can fold the laundry while you're listening to a podcast.
What mistakes have you made along the way? And I guess maybe another question is, if you had to start over again, what would you do differently?
I would have scaled. I don't have an issue with doing 7 days a week, because I think that really helped me. I crammed a lot of shows into a short period of time, and that really helped with, I think, credibility and with growth, and got me more clients. I would have pulled back on the frequency probably sooner. I wouldn't have waited to hundreds and hundreds of episodes to pull back. And the reason that there was a change in 2016, I mentioned I was launching online programs and restructuring a lot of things with my business. And I had somebody helping me out with it, a coach. Mm-hmm. I usually have at least one coach at any time. I do better when I'm working with coaches. And he said, one night we had a call, and he said, Mark, I need you to do something, but you're not going to like it. So I thought he wanted me to like kill someone or rob a bank or do something like that. I was like, uh-oh. But he said, I need you to scale your show back from 5 times a week to 2 times a week. And I just kind of thought about it for a few seconds. I said, sure, let's do it. I didn't sleep on it, and I didn't hum and haw or ponder it or go for a walk on the beach and think about it. I just knew in my gut that, yeah, I need to do it, because I was getting burnt out. You know, I was losing a bit of that joy and love for podcasting, because when I had some days, I batch my interviews, and I had some days where I was recording 10 interviews on a Tuesday.
Wow.
You know, just nonstop. And you guys know what it's like. It's not like you're chopping trees in the woods or hauling rocks, but mentally it takes a lot of energy to do a podcast. And by the time I got up to number 8, 9, or 10 of the day, I was just drained. I'm like, oh man, I need a Red Bull, you know, or something. I don't drink coffee. That's a problem. So I don't get caffeine anywhere. So yeah, that would be the change I would make. That was a mistake I made, is probably, you know, maybe closer to around episode 100, I would have scaled back to a lower frequency.
Now, your show is all about coaching. What kind of coaching advice could you give to podcasters who are just starting out, or who already have a podcast but maybe struggling?
Well, I would say that you have to focus on building the business and make sure that you have some way of monetizing that show. So I see a lot of people that put all this effort into the podcast, and they put so much blood, sweat, and tears into the podcast, but then there's nowhere to actually send the people to. So you could have the best podcast in the world. You could be giving the secret to life every episode, right? Mm-hmm. And just have an amazing podcast. But then if you don't have the proper business set up on the other end, then it's going to be a waste. So I do see a lot of people that worry too much about something to do with the audio levels, or some nerdy tech thing with something to do with the podcast, but they don't spend any time actually prospecting for their business or doing anything else with their business, talking to potential clients. And they think that the podcast is going to be that magic beanstalk, right? And it's not a money tree. So a lot of people that don't have a very good business think, oh, well, I'll start a podcast, and then suddenly the clients will come rolling in. And you need both parts of that equation. A good podcast, you also need a good business on the other side so that you can actually monetize a podcast.
You mentioned my pet peeve there, messing with the audio levels. And you also mentioned earlier not getting started quick enough. Basically, what do you call it? Podcrastination?
Yeah.
I'm going to steal
that. Yeah,
that's a great one.
Well, it's not mine. I stole it. So,
so hey, let's do this. Let me ask you one more question. I'm going to do a real quick speed round, and we'll wrap her up.
The biggest thing I would just probably stress it, because I've already mentioned it, is you just got to jump in and take action. I hate people that procrastinate. It drives me nuts. Just stop being perfectionist. Just take action, or you're never going to get anything done. Well said.
So let's shift gears. 10 real quick questions.
Okay.
Windows or Mac?
Mac, definitely. I'm a sheeple. Yeah.
Your word, not mine.
Yeah.
Number 2, iPhone or Android?
Well, obviously iPhone. I'm such a big Mac guy. Yeah.
Cat or dog person?
Dog, but I would never have one because I can't give them the attention they need. I'm not going out at 3 a.m. so they can pee, right?
No. Most recently read book?
You know what? I went another route other than 99% of what I read is personal development. So I read Harper Lee's follow-up to Kill a Mockingbird, Go Set a Watchman. Yeah, it was one that was found 50 years after she wrote it. So Go Set a Watchman. And I'm currently reading a book from Lee Steinberg, who's a super agent that Jerry Maguire was based off of. And
cool.
He's gone through some cool stuff. So yeah, Lee Steinberg's book I just started reading today.
Your favorite vacation spot and why?
I love Las Vegas. Yeah.
You can't go wrong in Vegas.
Yeah, actually, I got married in Vegas, and I'm divorced now, so that's another podcast. It wasn't a cocktail waitress, or like the Simpsons episode when Homer and Ned found Vegas wives. It wasn't like that, but yeah, I got married in Vegas back in 2006. Yeah.
Are you a techie or non-techie?
I'm a techie, but I'm probably about an 8 out of 10 or 7.5 to 8 out of 10. So it doesn't make sense for me to put in a ton of hours to be a 10 out of 10, because anything that I can't do, I'll just get somebody to do. But I can handle myself well enough. I'm just not a super nerd that I can do everything tech-wise, but I'm pretty good, So like I said, I'm pretty comfortable 8 out of 10.
Favorite success quote?
Whatever the mind of man can conceive and believe it can achieve. Napoleon Hill.
You bet. Love it. What's a tool you use every single day that you would absolutely hate to have to live without?
Schedule once. My online calendar. Anyone who's not using an online calendar, I won't say should be shot. That's extreme. But if you're an entrepreneur and you don't have an online calendar, there's free options. I mean, Schedule once is $20-some, but yeah, there's free options like Calendly. You're not serious if you don't have an online calendar.
Yeah. Interesting. I use Calendly. Schedule One was actually recommended by our last guest as well. What do you do for fun?
Podcast. No, I'm just kidding. You know what's funny? I play a lot of aerobie. I don't know if you guys know aerobie. It's like a ring, a big.
Yeah, I love those things.
Yeah, they go like a mile long.
Go
so
forever.
My twin brother Matt, I turned 38 just on Monday, so a few days after we record this. We're like a couple 21-year-olds diving around, playing aerobie and stuff like that. So it makes us feel young for half an hour or an hour while we're playing it. And then I hang around people in their 20s. I'm like, no, man, I'm old. But for that brief moment in time, I feel young.
So here's the last question, number 10. What's the most rewarding thing you've been able to do for someone else because of your podcast?
I think for me, the big thing, I'm a connector. I love connecting people. And I've really been able to connect a lot of past guests with each other, people that can help one another, and just some really cool connections. So I can't think of one specific one because there's been so many, but it's just been able to connect people in my world to each other who should know each other.
Terrific. So take a moment, do us a favor, share your contact information and where our podcasting friends and listeners can find out more about what you have to offer.
Sure. Yeah, the best spot, naturalborncoaches.com. And that's a central hub with everything. And then also thecoachingjungle.com will forward people to the Facebook group. So thecoachingjungle.com.
Perfect. Now, Marc, I want to thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for sharing your personal story and being so generous in sharing all the information that you have with us today. It's been great.
Yep, my pleasure.
If you're wondering what it takes to develop a profitable show of your own, James has put together a special report just for you where he lays out the core elements of the No Fail podcast. You can download it for free for a limited time at podcastingmastery.com/nofail. And to our podcasting friends, a reminder, if you have your own podcast or podcasting tool that you'd like us to feature here on the show, simply send us the details to feature me at podcastingmastery.com, and we may do exactly that. Lastly, if you missed here that we mentioned, keep in mind we do keep all the show notes for you, including links to everything we've talked about today. You can find those show notes for this episode at podcastingmastery.com/PM040.
Kimberly, thanks so much. Marc, you were awesome. Thank you again for sharing your story and all of your personal experiences and knowledge. And, of course, to all of our podcasting friends, thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you in the next edition of Podcasting Mastery.
Thanks for joining us in the Secret Beach Hut studio. If you are ready to start your podcasting adventure and to learn the secrets of creating a profitable podcast, James Martell has boiled it down for you to the 12 core elements of the No Fail podcast in his most recent free report. Available for a limited time at podcastingmastery.com/nofail. But don't wait, this report won't be free for long. So be sure to grab your free copy today to learn the secrets of podcasting your way to a stress-free lifestyle at podcastingmastery.com/nofail.